Hello, and welcome to this episode of Felonious, a podcast where we discuss the realm of true crime. From chilling cold cases to the wild and wacky, we'll explore it all with a perfect blend of seriousness and humour. My name is Emma.
And I'm Nazia. To keep up to date with what's coming up, be sure to follow us on Instagram at felonious.pod and visit our website feloniouspod.com. We hope you enjoy this episode, so let's get to it. Ta-da!
Another easy introduction.
Yes. So, well, I guess firstly, we should thank anyone who's taken the time out to listen to the first episode.
Yeah, thank you, listeners. We love you.
And you can't give us feedback because this is all pre-recorded.
Yeah, well, they still can, Nazia.
They can, but it's not going to change anything.
No, but we like feedback.
Yes, we do. Just be kind. Be kind. What's it called? Constructive criticism.
There you
That's
go.
It. Yeah.
You got there in the end.
Nothing uncalled for, please. Be kind.
Yeah. Hopefully you didn't realise the gap in recording that we had last time.
Was that when with the fat cat?
Yeah.
I have to say, kudos to Emma, who did an amazing job at editing. If I had even worse memory than I do now, I would have completely forgotten about the cat shenanigans that we had going on. For listeners, well, no one else will know apart from us, but my fat cat decided to jump on one of the laptops while we were recording.
He kindly paused the recording, though.
He did. He sent my laptop into screensaver mode, which stopped the recording, and he almost stepped on the other laptop. And he has this magic way of finding the off button, but let's hope he doesn't try and do that again. But Emma was trying not to get distracted because he made a couple of other attempts, and all you could see was me in the camera with like my arms out trying to stop him. Because he was like wiggling his bum on the bed, getting ready to pounce.
It was very distracting and very cute.
Yeah, it's cute when you're not on the receiving end of it.
My time will come with my dog Luna, probably.
If your dog jumps on the desks, everything's going to collapse.
It's probably something that she has in the works. She's planned it already. She's just waiting for the opportune moment.
It's going to happen when our guard is down.
The fat cat that sat on your laptop is not the fat cat who caught the bat this week, is it?
Oh no, Lockie doesn't hunt. He's too fat for that. I'm not fat shaming. He literally is too big and does not have the agility to hunt. He tries to hunt butterflies. He doesn't try for very long.
One of your cats committed a crime this week.
Yeah, she came. I mean, I saved the bat, so it was fine. She just brought it in. But it was broad daylight, so I don't know where she got it from.
Broad daylight crimes. They're just the worst.
So they go, and there's a cat in the bedroom right now. No, Paprika. Are you serious? Get off. But yeah, no, that one was the one that does hunt. Not very often. It's few and far between. But when she does, she likes to bring him in.
Just like Charles Sobhraj.
Yeah, I mean, he disposes of his. We're going to find out. I mean, I think people that are worried about cats hunting, they should be more worried about people like Charles Sobhraj, who very needlessly killed people in the 1970s. And to this day, well, since his release, is adamant that he's not a serial killer.
We'll get to that.
Yeah. So we're gonna go through all of that. Before we recap, I guess we should do a bit of a disclaimer.
Bit of a trigger warning.
Trigger warning. So I don't think we swore that much last time.
No.
We said we would, but we didn't.
Yeah, we need to improve on that.
Yeah, so we might swear this time because some of the content will call for it. Still going to have the bad French, still going to have the bad English, might have the Cockney. I don't know if it came through last time.
I definitely have the Cockney accent.
Yeah, I think I do as well.
I'm not going to change.
No.
I'm going to do me.
Yes, you do you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this episode, it's going to get into the actual murders. So there's going to be some details of murders. not horrendous, but it's there.
Just don't let your children listen, please, people.
Yes, these podcasts aren't for people under a certain age. There is a bit of a trend, not a trend. Sorry, I'm going to digress a bit. But there are some people that let their children listen to true crime podcasts.
What?
Yeah, I'm not going to parent shame, but I don't think that's what the intended audiences are for these kinds of podcasts. Anyway.
They're not really bedtime stories.
No, but some people listen to them in the car with their kids.
Although, Roald Dahl rhymes can be a bit murderous.
Yeah, I guess. But his intended audience was, I mean, not saying, but his intended audience were mostly children, I guess.
I'm just saying that crocodile had it in for a lot of people.
Yeah, but that's just nature, isn't it?
Yeah, true, probably.
I don't know. I can excuse a crocodile. I can't forgive a man. Don't know where we're going with this.
Or a woman.
Yeah, or a woman, or a they, non-binary person. Anyway.
We're not experts.
We're not experts. We're not celebrating the perpetrators of the crimes, although I think Charles Sobhraj, he's such a narcissist. He'd absolutely love it if people celebrated him. But we're not, we're not going to celebrate him, and we're definitely not going to make fun of his victims.
No, we just enjoy talking about crime.
Yeah, and just trying to pick it apart.
Yeah. What happened on the last episode? I have no memory of that whatsoever. Yeah. You're going to have to remind me of what happened.
Right, so the last episode covered quite an expansive time frame. It covered the first 31 years of his life. So he's still younger than us at this point. But so much happened. So we learnt about his abusive childhood and his very unstable childhood. He was brought up in a war-torn country and kind of just passed around between homes and was trying to run away back to his biological father in between. We also discussed the beginnings of his criminal career, from robbing housewives, stealing passports, and he murdered one person, and we're going to see how that kind of escalates. He adds a few numbers to his list. And we explored his complicated marriage to Chantal and some of his other affairs. And by this point, he's already got numerous children, because he had 2 with Chantal Denoyers. He's got 1 with Chantal Compagnon, his wife. And then he got that Indian girl pregnant.
Yeah, there could be others that we don't know about.
Yes, exactly.
We don't know.
I just took a DNA test. Sorry. That was terrible.
Oh, God, could you imagine?
I know. In episode 3, we'll talk about it. But there's something that happens that's going to happen in part 3.
Even I don't know this, listeners.
So, yeah, we'll get to that in the next episode. So just to kind of add to some of the things we discussed last time, something we didn't mention was when Chantal found out about Charles's fraud while they were still in France and his father was visiting. When she confronted him back at Felix's apartment, basically, like, what the fuck was he doing? Committing fraud. And he was desperate for them to leave the country before the banks found out. His excuse was, well, the banks are insured, they're not losing anything anyway. So yeah, we're going to see in the next 2 episodes how Charles always manages to find a way to justify his actions, probably to convince himself and everyone else around him that he isn't guilty and that his crimes are, air quotes, justified. Another thing that we didn't mention, but it's explained in The Hawk and Hyena, Chantal tells Farouk Dondi that Charles was renamed because Jacques, his stepfather, didn't want to adopt a child with an Indian name, and Charles de Gaulle, the president, was his hero. So in the Neville and Clark book, Charles's biological father is named Hochand, but according to The Hawk and Hyena, his first name is Sobhraj, and Jacques names Charles Sobhraj as the surname as a way to keep a connection to his birth father.
Right.
Yes. I just wish they would just stick to the one name for each person, because everyone has a different name.
I think we're going to have to make a list for our listeners of all the names.
And for ourselves.
Yeah, and so we can keep track.
We'll have it somewhere on the website, the names, so people can kind of keep up. Part 1 ended when Charles had just escaped prison in Greece and boarded a flight to Delhi. So let's go on to Part 2.
Yeah, what happens in Part 2?
So in this episode, we're going to delve further into Charles's life, and, he's also known as the Serpent and the Bikini Killer, and we're going to find out why in this episode. We're going to follow his journey from being a petty thief to a notorious serial killer and a scam artist who targeted young backpackers travelling along the popular hippie trail in Southeast Asia during the 1970s. We'll also discuss the gem dealer using the alias Alain Gautier and Charles's connection with Marie Leclerc, and he also gives her an alias as Monique, and the multitude of individuals who fell victims to his crimes. Part 1 to this episode covered the first 30 years of his life. This part 2, is only going to cover 1 year, 1975 to 1976, which might seem like quite a short time span compared to Part 1, but as you'll see, it's going to be a very busy one, and shit escalates quickly.
Shit hits the fan.
Yes. Quite, especially with all those laxatives he's dishing out.
Oh God, yeah.
Yep.
But first, we should explain what the hippie trail was. The hippie trail was made popular with members of the hippie subculture during the mid-1950s to the late 1970s, and people made this journey via overland means, so by bus, car, boat, pedalo, what have you. From Europe to South Asia, so countries such as Turkey, Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Thailand. People from the US would also make this journey, but they would travel by a plane to Luxembourg and further to Asia from there. So the whole aim of this journey was to travel as cheaply as possible and to basically extend the length of time away from home, because a lot of people were students or people who were just about to start work. So it was a good time to have away from family life, maybe.
It's like the original gap year, wasn't it?
Yeah. There were also hotels, restaurants and cafes along the route that Westerners would frequent, and there would be other fellow travellers there, so they would be able to network with each other. During the early 1970s, a man called Tony Wheeler travelled along the hippie trail, and he wrote a guidebook with his wife Maureen, and that led to the start of Lonely Planet, which I didn't know about until I researched this bit about the hippie trail.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I used to use the Lonely Planet books way back.
The hippie trail fell into decline in the late 1970s due to the Iranian Revolution and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and commercial airline travel was becoming more affordable for people. I found a really good animated timeline that CNN have on their website, and we'll link to it in the episode description or on our website. But it explains everything about the hippie trail and includes a bit about Sobhraj as well.
Oh, nice. Right, speaking of Charles Sobhraj, let's get back to the story. In 1975, Charles landed in Delhi, where there were wanted posters of him from the Oshaka hotel robbery. So this is the one where he apparently held the flamenco dancer hostage and used her to help him steal the jewels. But because he had changed his appearance, he wasn't recognised. Guy, his half-brother, was still in prison, but because of the identity switch, the authorities believed it was Guy who had escaped and not Charles. Felix wrote to the authorities suggesting that there had been a mix-up with the identities, and the guard that tortured Guy recognised him from his arrest and told the authorities that Guy was actually still in prison, and it was Charles that had escaped. So Guy was sentenced to 2 years and 10 months.
We should probably remind people who Felix is.
Yes, so Felix was the friend that Charles made when he was in Poissy jail in 1964, I think it was. And he's the one that kind of helped Charles get his French nationality. He took Charles into his home after he served his prison sentence.
And it was through Felix he met Chantal, wasn't it?
Yeah, and even though after Felix tries to not convince Chantal to leave Charles, but expressed his concerns at her devotion to him, Charles kind of like disowned him. But then when Charles got in trouble again, they both went begging back to Felix. for his help, and he ended up being back in their lives again. So on the 5th of May, Charles flew to Kashmir, and on the flight he met a French couple, and he introduced himself as Alain Gautier. Marie-Andrée Leclerc, a French-Canadian from Quebec, was on the same flight, along with her ex-fiancé, Jules Dupont. She noticed Charles on the flight, especially as he spoke French. When they landed, Marie saw Charles at the government tourist centre, where he was arguing with a Kashmiri about prices of a houseboat. And that's when Charles convinced Marie and Jules to join him and the French couple to share a 3-bedroom houseboat. Marie reminded Charles of Chantal, who he believed still loved him despite their divorce. Going back 2 years, just to give a bit more background to Marie. So Marie and Jules were living in Canada and were engaged 2 years prior. At the time of the engagement, Jules's mother found out through their neighbours and not Jules himself. Jules's mother demanded that the couple live with them, but Marie would have none of this and decided to call the wedding off. A year before travelling, Marie received a large insurance payout for injuries she sustained in an accident in 1966. So after she called the engagement off with Jules Dupont, they remained friends. And before coming to Asia, Marie actually wanted to travel through Europe, but Jules was more interested in India. So Marie agreed to travel with him to Asia.
In Marie's book, I need your help with pronouncing the name of it.
Je reviens.
Thank you. She clarified that she wasn't engaged to Jules, but they were good friends.
Yes, so at the time that they were travelling, I think it was misreported in newspapers that they were engaged at the time that they were in India, but they were engaged 2 years prior.
It says that she said that they weren't engaged, but they did have a serious relationship for a few years.
Ah, yes. No, you're right. Yeah, in her book, she does say that. In the Neville book, it says that they were engaged.
They were engaged, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, that's my... See, this is the thing. There's so many conflicting stories.
There is. You just can't keep track.
No, you can't. I can't keep track.
It's a good job we're doing this podcast so people can keep track of what's going on here.
They can keep track of us not keeping track.
Yeah.
So, going back to May 1975, over the next few days, they all toured the sights of Kashmir. Marie enjoyed Charles's conversations as he came across educated, charming, and mysterious. He told Marie he was a businessman. He kept details of his business vague, but said that it required a lot of travel. Near the end of her holiday, Marie and Charles shared a kiss, but they were interrupted by Jules, who ordered Marie back to their room. The next day, Marie told Charles that her and Jules were not together, but that Jules would be angry about Marie's feelings towards Charles. In the Neville book, it states that Marie then professed her love to Charles. However, in her memoirs, Marie mentions that she didn't feel love for Charles, but a certain affection. Now, I'm wondering if she wrote that out of hindsight to kind of, after all she'd been through.
Yeah, I wondered that as well.
To kind of try and distance herself from him, understandably, because he kind of abused her and trapped her in Asia, which will...
Yeah, but she might have mistaken that for love at the time.
Yes, yeah.
And then realised afterwards, oh, no, wait, I was abused.
Yeah. Charles, on the other hand, he thought about how useful Western women were in Asia, especially those without criminal convictions. How romantic, Charles. Later, Charles spoke to Jules, who told him that he, Jules, didn't have a chance and that Charles could do what he liked because Marie is just a piece of flesh that they can pass between themselves, apparently. The group then flew back to Delhi 4 days later. On the flight, Charles tells Marie that he spoke to Jules and that he liked her very much. However, he couldn't see the relationship working as she lived in Canada. Marie then offered to come back to Asia. Later that night, Charles and Marie spent the night together, and then the other French couple that they were sharing the houseboat with in Kashmir, they left and went to Bali. Charles had planned on drugging and robbing them, but he was distracted by Marie. God, it just sounds so ridiculous. And it's just this whole misogynistic attitude between him and Jules. Oh, you can have her.
I reckon that was what was done at the time. Like, it was the 1970s.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's no excuse for it. It's still wrong.
Yeah. She's like literally being treated like property.
Yeah.
And Charles does view her as property because he's using her for his means, which we'll see. So the next morning, Charles had breakfast with Marie and Jules. They then went to Connaught Circus, where Jules began to feel dizzy. He was helped back to the hotel, and Charles offered him vitamins, but they were actually sleeping pills. The following morning, Charles made Marie confirm that she would leave her job in Canada and go and live with him in Asia. Then Jules found out about Charles and Marie, and he shouted at Marie. However, Charles intervened and calmed the situation down, and Jules agreed to step aside.
This is all coming from the Neville and Clark book, which is Charles's, story of what happened.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if Jules did actually shout at Marie, and because if they were just friends, maybe Jules kind of realised what a snake Charles was, and that's why he was shouting at Marie. Who knew? Who knows?
Yeah. We'll never know. But I mean, this account just sounds ridiculous. Anyway, so then Charles offered to take them both to Kathmandu and then to Bangkok for 8 days. On the 25th of May, they returned to Bombay. Charles revealed to Marie that his name was not Alain. Due to the nature of his business, he had to travel a lot and change his identity. He gave Marie his mother's French address in case they lost contact, and then asked for hers in return. Before she got on her flight, Charles told Marie that she reminded him of his wife.
It's such an odd thing to tell someone who you're trying to get in a relationship with.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's some sort of twisted manipulation tactic. It's like, first he's trying to coerce her devotion to him by saying, you're going to, trying to convince her to upheave her life in Canada for him, who she's only just met, a few weeks ago. And then to tell her, oh, you remind me of my wife. It's like, he's probably saying, she's good enough to be a sort of replacement for his wife, but at the same time, she'll never be his first wife. I don't know. It's just, It is a really odd thing to say, and it kind of creeps me out.
It could be a way of him to make her feel jealous.
Yeah, in some weird way.
Yeah, what a weirdo.
It's not a good start.
So the 4th of June, Charles is still in Bombay, and he met a Swedish girl in Dipty's house of pure drinks. But drinks are not so pure with Charles around.
Nope, they are not.
Dipty's house of pure drinks was a place he would frequent to find people that could help him commit his crimes, or or where he could top up his passport bank, basically. This Swedish girl that he met, she introduced him to a nuclear scientist who was giving a lecture at the Atomic Research Centre in Bombay. Charles spiked the scientist's drink and then injected him with Quaalude when he was asleep. Charles then stole all of his valuables from his hotel room, and the last thing the nuclear scientist remembered was that he was having a coffee with a Swedish girl who introduced him to an Asian-looking French-speaking man. I wonder who that was. 2 weeks later, a security guard working at the Taj Mahal Hotel recognised Charles walking through the lobby. The nuclear scientist had given them a description of the guy that had drugged him and robbed him. The security chief went to arrest Charles, but he managed to escape. Surprise, surprise. The security chief's files confirmed that it was Charles Sobhraj who was still wanted for the Ashoka hotel robbery 4 years earlier. The Bombay police were alerted later on, and Charles was arrested at the Ritz Hotel, along with the Swedish girl, and put in the back of a van. However, he managed to escape again.
You got to hand it to him. He knows how to escape.
He's living up to his alias, isn't he?
Yeah.
The Swedish girl said that she pitied Charles after hearing about his early life, and she wanted to support him and stand by him. She went to jail.
Of course.
Meanwhile, a few days after she had returned to Quebec, Marie began receiving telegrams, postcards, and letters from Charles. He was love-bombing her. Marie's book states that Charles said that he would write to her when she was back in Canada, but she was sure she would never hear from him again. Charles declared that he wanted Marie to be his wife. She suspected that Charles knew that she had money from the injury settlement, so that's probably why he kept on declaring his want for her to be his wife. She found this whole thing surprising, as in Canada you won't become someone's wife that quickly or in that way. From July, she received phone calls from Charles. He said he couldn't travel to Canada because of his business commitments in Thailand and Hong Kong. She needed to get to know him better before agreeing to marry him, like any normal person would. In her book, can you pronounce the name of the title again, please?
Je reviens.
Marie explained that she didn't leave Quebec for Charles, but to save the marriage of a doctor she was in love with. She claims to have been having an affair with this doctor who had a family, and she wanted to save the family home, basically, didn't she, from being destroyed, even if it meant everything she had gone through.
Yeah, like everything that Charles had put her through. She kind of like tries to justify it, saying, even though I'm in jail and all of this has happened, at least I didn't destroy the family of this doctor back home.
Yeah, you just helped destroy other people's lives. Still in July 1975, Charles went to Hong Kong and claimed his reason for being there was that he had accepted an offer to work with a group of Chinese businessmen who were involved in smuggling heroin from Thailand to Europe. The organisation had declared war on travellers who would carry heroin on the same routes for thousands of dollars. Amateur drug rings often got caught, attracting unwanted attention to the bigger organisations. According to Charles, he led drug caravans through the Khyber Pass in Pakistan, which is why the organisation hired him to discourage the amateurs. He claimed he was paid a large fee into his bank account and was given names by the cartel.
I think it's worth noting here that the Netflix dramatization doesn't mention any of this.
No, not at all.
So I don't know if it's been confirmed as complete bullshit.
Everything Charles says, like, take it with a pinch of salt.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was told by this Chinese drug cartel to set up in Bangkok and that they would send him an assistant to help him. Charles met a young French man named Alain Gautier in Hong Kong, and he stole his passport and took on the name Alain Gautier. On the 28th of July, Charles went to Singapore. A Cartier representative he had befriended in Hong Kong was staying at the Hyatt Hotel, and he allowed him access to his room. Charles took silk shirts, new suits, and a crocodile skin attaché case and cleaned out the safe deposit box. He bought diamond rings with the Cartier representative's credit cards and took a flight to Bangkok. 3 days later, he called Marie. On the 2nd of August, Marie arrived in Bangkok to a cold and emotionless Charles. They took a limousine to the Raja Hotel. Charles gave Marie boxes of jewellery. In that box contained a jade pendant with the matching ring, a diamond ring, and a sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds. But Marie refused to accept the jewels first of all, and it says in the Neville book, this flash of independence showed Charles a trait he didn't like in a woman.
Of course.
Which sounds about right, doesn't it, at this point?
Yeah, because she's meant to be his little, his tool and his accomplice to help him achieve what he wants to achieve.
Yeah. Charles told her about his illegal business and that he would introduce her as his secretary under a different name for her own protection. Charles had chosen the alias Monique for Marie, who was introduced sometimes as his wife and other times as his secretary. Charles had many relationships with other women at the time. One of them was a Thai woman who managed a jewellery shop, and he saw these relationships as security, not love. And if he had something illegal to hide, his girlfriend could keep it, and he used the women that he had relationships with to act as spies, translators, and a source for business contacts.
What a charming man.
Charles introduced Marie to one of his girlfriends and explained his intentions. He planned to introduce Marie as his secretary initially, allowing his girlfriend time to adjust to the idea of their relationship. How kind. Charles expected that within a month the girlfriend would come to accept Maria as his wife. I doubt it.
Yes.
Charles played a psychological game with Marie. He would sometimes act really close and passionate with her, and then the next he would be cold and distant. So that caused Marie to feel frustrated and deceived. She says in her book, I quickly realised that he wasn't as nice as I had imagined. Besides, I don't remember having had a really pleasant time with Charles, and from the first day I told myself that I would not stay along with a man like that who could not accept me as I was. But the relationship went on for like over a year.
Yeah, not by her doing, as we'll see. And I guess she's put in a difficult situation where she's literally left her home country, travelled to another continent, and this time she doesn't have Jules or anyone she knows. So she's literally on her own.
A week after Marie arrived, Charles asked her for $500. At this point, Marie was still not sure whether she would stay with Charles because of his secrets, Thai girlfriends and false names, and any other things that he didn't tell her about.
Yeah.
After 15 days in Bangkok, Marie's visa expired, and Charles arranged for its extension and borrowed the last of her money, another $500, which is a lot of money back then. Her visa came up for renewal again in August, and he promised to renew it, but he didn't.
So, yeah, when he was supposed to go to the immigration office, he prioritised his business instead, and that allowed her the validity of her visa to lapse. And then Charles falsified her visa, and I think she showed it to a friend, and they said to her, this is clearly a fake, and the immigration officers will know it. And Marie learnt from then on that Charles was never going to let her go home.
This meant that Marie was an illegal alien without any money or a return flight home. She basically became Charles's prisoner. And she said that she was under the impression that he was rich because he told her that he had loads of money. He was a successful businessman.
Yeah. And he gave her all that jewellery when she arrived.
Yeah, exactly. So he's shown his wealth straight away. So
yeah.
she fearlessly lent him all the money that she brought, thinking that she would probably get it back.
Yeah. So on the 4th of September, Charles and Marie met an Australian couple called Russell and Vera Lapthorne in Pattaya. Charles pretended to be a psychiatrist called Jean Belmont and introduced Marie as Monique. Charles convinced the couple to accompany them to Singapore. Once they were there, the Australian couple began to feel unwell. Charles went to the shop to get the couple some tinned milk, which he said would help soothe their stomachs. 36 hours later, the couple were found by the hotel maids, sprawled on the floor.
I would absolutely refuse that tinned milk. I hate milk.
I don't know if it was from the 70s, but I remember growing up, like, condensed milk in a tin was quite popular.
Yeah, I don't know why. It's disgusting.
Yeah.
You would have refused it as well because you're vegan.
I wasn't vegan then.
Oh, no, but true.
I would now. They were then taken to the hospital and they had to have their stomachs pumped. Once they were better, they returned to the hotel and found that their passports, marriage certificate, driving licence, $900 in currency, a cine camera, and jewellery had all gone missing.
What would he have done with the marriage certificate?
No idea. Or maybe he just grabbed whatever he could.
Yeah, whatever was in there.
I mean, what's he going to do with a camera? Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I don't want to know. They knocked on the door to the room next to theirs, which belonged to Jean Belmont and his wife, Monique, but they had vanished. They told the police their story, but nothing could be done, so they went back to Bangkok and went to the embassy for help. However, Russell then became seriously ill and he had to stay in hospital for 2 weeks. Charles and Marie returned to Bangkok and they signed a lease on Canut House, which was a 1950s rundown 5-storey set of apartments. The couple's apartment was number 504. Charles picked it for its location as it was close to the tourist area of Bangkok, near the bars and big hotel. So the only thing to decorate the apartment with was Charles's punching bag, which he placed there so he could entertain and show off his strength to people that would come to do business. What a weird man. He also got a monkey called Coco, a gibbon, which he had bought at a stall on the Sunday market. And he got the monkey as a way to distract people that he had planned to entertain. And Coco was sadly kept in a cage on the balcony.
We'll mention Coco later on as well.
Yeah, it's horrible and it's sad. But I remember when I went to Thailand, I went to a massive Sunday market and they had like puppies in tiny cages.
Oh my God.
It was like they were selling them as if they were stuffed toy animals.
Oh,
it was horrible. And this was like this time. So I can't even imagine what you could get in the 1970s. But yeah, it's just really depressing.
Oh God, you're going to make me cry on our podcast.
So yeah, I know. Well, it's horrible. Marie wrote in her journal, "We have an apartment and that gives me hope. At last we spend the night, just the two of us, in our home. and this makes me really happy.
Before they got the Cannet House apartment, he used to basically leave her in the hotels, didn't he?
Yeah, basically like what he did with Chantal.
Yeah.
Yeah. He treats them kind of like he treats the monkey, you know, just gets them out when he needs them.
Gets them out for show.
Yeah, basically. 2 weeks later, Charles had been informed by his employers that a Frenchman, André Brunot, disguised as an antiques dealer, would be travelling from Paris to Bangkok via Hong Kong, with his final destination being Chiang Mai. André was sent by a European drug ring to pay off local heroin suppliers. Charles spotted him at the Royal Hotel in Bangkok and struck up a conversation by speaking French. Charles mentioned casually that he and his wife, Monique, were planning a trip to Chiang Mai, so Charles offered to drive him there. Once in Chiang Mai, Charles dosed André with a set of laxatives and then drove back to Bangkok with Marie. They travelled together with another Frenchman named Dominique Renelot. Sorry.
I have no chance pronouncing that name. I'm going to murder that name. No pun intended.
We'll stick to Dominique from here on. So Dominique Renelot, whom they met in a restaurant. Charles introduced himself as Alain and told Dominique about his gem business. After dinner, Dominique barely made it to his guest house before experiencing severe symptoms of illness, including sweating, shaking, vomiting, and diarrhea that persisted throughout the night. The next morning, Dominique woke up on the floor of his room. Charles suggested that Dominique should go home with them to Cannet House, assuring him that they would take care of him. Charles and Marie helped him into their car and gave him something that would alleviate his symptoms. Dominique was unconscious for most of the journey. Charles would later claim that he befriended Dominique so that he would have an alibi for his interaction with André Brognon the following day. The next day, Charles flew back to Chiang Mai to see André. André didn't recognise Charles at first, but then he realised he was in danger. Charles beat André and threatened him with a gun, asking him who he worked for. André revealed information about his heroin business and provided the names of couriers coming to Thailand. Charles drugged André, and when he passed out, he undressed him and put him in the bathtub. Charles then switched the tap on and held André's head under water until he died. He made the scene look like a suicide by placing André's smoking pipe on a stool near the bathtub, positioning a newspaper so that half of it was in the water and the other half outside, and he left sleeping tablets on the sink. Charles wiped his fingerprints, locked the door, and hung a Do Not Disturb sign. He then caught the afternoon flight back to Bangkok. André was found by a maid. The French embassy records stated that he was found in the bathtub with a bloody nose. The police found no foul play and listed it as an accident. Charles would later describe André's death as a cleaning. The contacts André had given Charles were Vitaly Hakim and Teresa Knowlton, who we will discuss later on. Charles told Dominique the details of his business, that he bought gems directly from the mines in Chantaburi, and by cutting out the middleman, he was able to make a huge profit and save his customers money. Dominique offered to pay for the drinks in the bar, but he noticed that his wallet was missing, as well as his passport and $1,000 of traveller's checks. Charles told him that he took his valuables and put them in his safe at the bank, as he was worried about how sick Dominique was and he felt responsible for him. Dominique then asked for his passport back, but the next day he was sick again. He started to appreciate Charles and Marie's help, but unbeknownst to him, he was being poisoned by them.
In October 1975, Dominique started to feel better, and Charles said he could stop taking the medicine, but as Dominique was planning to leave, he started to feel sick again. Charles welcomed AJ Chowdhury into Cannet House and asked Dominique to move out of the spare room so that AJ could move in. In Hawk and Hyena, AJ was described as an Indian in his 20s, a dropout from Delhi University who had abandoned his family and gone trekking on the hippie trail. He was staying at the Malaysia Hotel when Charles first met him, and he hired AJ to find customers for him at this hotel. Cannet House became a mecca for Western travellers, drawn in by stories told by AJ about the gem dealer Alain Gautier and his cut-rate jewels. Dominique was sometimes asked to pretend to be a customer, telling others he made profitable trips to Paris by selling the gems he purchased from Alain. Charles showed his impatience with the young travellers and their use of marijuana, which is ironic given that he drugged so many people himself. Marie became unhappy in her relationship with Charles and started to feel like a slave, but despite this, her love for him continued to grow. So it said in the Neville and Clark book anyway. AJ met Teresa Knowlton at the Malaysia Hotel and brought her to Cannet House. Teresa was a 21-year-old backpacker from Seattle on her journey to join the Buddhist monastery in Nepal. At 12 years old, her parents divorced and she moved from Seattle to live with her grandmother in California. In the late 1960s, she started to use drugs, and at 17 she moved back to Seattle to live with her mother, but it didn't work out. She fostered herself out to a security guard at her school who also had other foster children. At 19 years old, she went on a trip with a friend to Kathmandu and discovered Buddhism, and her drug taking stopped. Teresa decided to go back to the monastery and live with the lamas for a year. Before she left America, she told her grandmother of her travel plans via Hong Kong and Bangkok. Teresa travelled to Hong Kong in mid-August and then to Bangkok on October the 12th. Teresa met Dominique at Cannet House and he took a liking to her. The usually gloomy Marie was laughing at Teresa's stories of her personal life. Marie introduced Teresa to Charles and he invited her to spend a weekend in Pattaya, where he had a bungalow. She accepted the invitation. Charles later claimed Teresa's name was given to him by André Brunon. A few days later, Charles and AJ picked Teresa up from the hotel and took her to a bar on the way to Pattaya. Charles spiked a drink. They drove Teresa to a field and interrogated her and asked who she worked for, accusing her of being a drug dealer. Charles and AJ undressed Teresa and put her in a bikini and removed all of her jewellery. Charles then instructed AJ to drown her. Believed to be his first female victim, her body was found in a tidal pool on 18th of October. Her death was treated as accidental until the autopsy revealed she had been drugged and drowned. Her corpse was unidentified, and it would be 7 months before her family knew where she was buried. Marie cashed in Teresa's traveller's checks a few days after her death.
And it's quite sad because Teresa's grandmother, obviously the correspondence they had back then were letters, which took time. And, wasn't her grandmother worried when she hadn't heard from Teresa for a really long time? And she tried to contact whoever she could to help find her daughter. But because so many people went missing on the hippie trail or just lost contact with their families for whatever reason, it wasn't really taken seriously. But her grandmother knew that something had gone wrong.
Right, and there wasn't good contact between the embassies back then.
No, which we'll see later on as well. So in the Hawk and Hyena, this is the only death in this period that Farouk kind of writes about. But in his book, Charles claims that Teresa had drugged herself. And when they partied in Bangkok, apparently she very clearly signalled to Charles that she wanted him to have sex with her. So they had to get away from Marie. He then says that Teresa had prepared herself wearing a flowery bikini under her loose clothes and went into the water. So her death is the one that started off the whole bikini killer name, didn't it?
I think, wasn't she the only one that was wearing a bikini?
I think so, yeah. So she went into the water and, according to this version of events, AJ swam after her while Charles was still kind of preparing himself to get into the water. And before Charles could realise what was happening and reach them, AJ had apparently drowned Teresa on his own accord. Her autopsy confirmed that she died by drowning, but was also so sedated with a dose that was so heavy it could have been intended as fatal. Farouk Dondi suggested that Charles was testing AJ on his dependability, and he made sure AJ was complicit in Teresa's murder so that Charles would have a hold on him over the crimes that followed, which makes sense because that's what he does. So the day after Teresa's visit, Dominique answered the phone to a woman asking for a man named Charles, but Dominique didn't recognise the name because he knew Charles as Alain. Charles rushed to the phone and explained to the woman that he didn't like the name Charles and preferred to be called Alain. This woman was Nadine Gears, and she was a downstairs neighbour who lived with her husband Rémi. She worked part-time at one of the embassies translating English press cuttings to French. Charles told Nadine about his gem business and offered her work. He was interested in working with the diplomats from the embassies and offered Nadine 10% commission. He introduced Nadine to Marie, and Dominique. Nadine questioned if Dominique had been to hospital because he was sick still, but Marie said that Charles was knowledgeable about Asian diseases. At the end of October, Marie confided in Nadine about Charles's affairs, and she told her her real name. Charles and AJ met two French ex-detectives, Francois Duby and Yannick Massy, at the Malaysia Hotel. The ex-detectives had told Charles that they were looking for work and they wanted to extend their visas. Charles helped them get a visa extension and then took them to Pattaya on the promise that they would get work in the hotels there. While they were in Pattaya, they all stayed in a bungalow. At dinner, Francois began to feel sick and went to rest. When he woke up, he found his passports and traveller's checks were missing, and Charles blamed the staff at the bungalows. Yannick then felt dizzy and he was helped back to his room, but realised he had left his bag behind. By the time they rushed back to get it, it was gone. Charles then offered for them to stay at Cannet House so they could work for him there. The next morning, Nadine brought two of her friends to see Charles, and he offered to take them to Pattaya to go snorkeling, as he was planning to go there to go to the mines and get more gems.
It's very generous.
Yeah, it's like his little MO going back to this location. The next night, Nadine and Remy received a phone call from her two friends who said that their passports and $4,000 worth of traveller's checks had been stolen, and that they had shared a bungalow with Charles and AJ. Nadine's friends suspected that AJ had stolen the passports and checks. The next day, Nadine asked Marie if she trusted AJ, but Marie convinced her that AJ had nothing to do with it. Charles spoke to Nadine's friends and accused them of slander and that Pattaya was well known for its high crime rate. They apologised to him and he offered to rent out the downstairs apartment and the money that they were missing.
He threatened them that they had to give them money back before they left because he had studied law in Paris.
Yeah, he's such a sneaky little shit.
He's such a fucker.
I know, he really is. Nadine was then reassured that both AJ and Charles had nothing to do with her friend's robbery or that of Francois and Yannick, but her husband Remy was suspicious of Charles, rightfully so.
Yeah, good Remy.
Charles planned to buy his own jewellery shop and have one of his Thai girlfriends as the official owner, as foreigners were not legally allowed to own businesses in Thailand. He took Nadine on a trip to the jewellery shops, and when he opened his attaché case to take out business cards, Nadine noticed that he had a fake beard and a moustache in there. Charles recruited both Yannick and Francois, along with Rainer Stein. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name right.
Rainer Stein?
Yeah, it's a German name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm saying it in a French accent, sorry. Whom Nadine had introduced to Charles and was helping him with the new gem shop.
On the 27th of October, Nadine met Vitaly Hakim at Charles's apartment. Vitaly was from Turkey. His family owned a successful textile business in Istanbul, which he was destined to inherit. He was intelligent, well-educated, but succumbed to the party life and drugs when he moved to Ibiza. He began smuggling marijuana and heroin and came to Bangkok in October, financed by a fellow Turk who arranged couriers to collect heroin from Vitaly to take into Europe. When Nadine saw him in Charles's apartment, he said he was feeling sick. He was addicted to heroin and weighed 57 kilograms. Charles later claimed that Vitaly's name was given to him by André Brunon. Charles told everyone at his apartment that Vitaly would be accompanying him and AJ to the gem mines. That night, Charles drugged Vitaly and put him in his car and drove to Sriracha, where Charles gagged and handcuffed him. Charles left Vitaly in the car to torture him while AJ kept watch. The next day, they drove to Chanthaburi. Both Charles and AJ interrogated and beat Vitaly in order to get names of other drug couriers. Charles claimed Vitaly gave him the name of Stephanie Parry, Vitaly's girlfriend, who we will discuss later. They then drove back to Pattaya, where Charles broke Vitaly's neck and set fire to his body. Charles later said that his employers in Hong Kong told him to make an example of Vitaly to show other amateur drug dealers from Europe that his employers didn't want their turf stepped on. When Vitali's body was found, one of the villagers found light brown hair samples left on Vitali's legs, but the police weren't notified until much later. Vitali's body was not identified, and the police concluded that it was a case of suicide. His body was buried near to the unmarked grave of Teresa Norton. The next day, Nadine came to the apartment and asked how Vitali was. Marie said that Vitali had met some friends and went to Pattaya. Nadine saw his belongings still in Cannock House, to which Marie said he would be back in a few days to collect them.
I'm sorry, but how can a burnt body be seen as suicide?
Yeah, I was wondering that. I have no idea.
Anyway, just a question, but anyway.
On the 4th of November, a picture of Teresa's body appeared in the Bangkok Post. Police appealed for anyone to contact them if they recognised the body. On the same day, Dominic saw a bottle of the medicine that Marie was giving him. He realised that he felt much better when he had forgotten to take the medicine and read on the label that it should not be used for more than 2 days. He started to wonder if he was being poisoned. To test his suspicion, he took the medicine once more and made note of its effects. He began to feel dizzy, and within minutes, he collapsed. But before his suspicions about being poisoned, Dominic would sometimes make his medicine himself and then forget about it and leave it around the apartment. And one day, Coco the monkey got hold of a glass and drank it and died.
Yeah.
And Marie blamed Dominic for Coco's death.
It's really sad.
Yeah.
I mean, that monkey was living a miserable life as it is.
It was in the next Netflix show as well, that bit, wasn't it?
Yeah, they included that. Yeah, it's really sad.
Dominique kept asking Charles for his passport, but he kept making excuses. He saw that AJ had started to carry a flick knife, which wasn't uncommon in Bangkok then. Dominique and Francois, the ex-detective, did most of the daily chores, with AJ asking them to do laundry and make coffee. They were moved down to apartment 103 as Charles wanted them out of the way as he had so many customers coming to buy gems. Yannick, the other ex-detective, became a personal secretary to Charles.
When Teresa Norton was staying at the Malaysia Hotel back in October, there was also a young Dutch couple called Cornelia Hemke and Henk
Bintanja.
On the 8th of December, Cornelia wrote a letter to her sister describing how the couple had met a Frenchman and his wife who dealt in precious stones, and that they had purchased a ring. Charles had acted very generously, paying for food and drinks, and even hinted that the couple might not even need to pay for the ring. Upon reading Cornelia's letter, her brother-in-law thought that it was strange that somebody would be selling such a ring at a cheap price, but he wasn't worried about the couple as they were wary people and would not be easily duped. Charles would often hang around the jewellery shops in Bangkok to observe travellers that would visit. As they entered, he would then warn them that they had been scammed with fake diamonds and other jewels, and he would tell them that he could sell them the real thing and at a cheaper price. But the travellers were often unsure about the price and the quality.
In the shops?
In the shops, yeah. And then as they came out, Charles would give them I told you so look, and then he would offer them his diamonds at a cheaper price while befriending them. And Cornelia and Henk, they were very, very sensible people, weren't they?
Yeah, they were very well educated.
They put a lot of consideration into the decisions that they made, including purchasing this ring.
Yeah.
On the 9th of December, Dominique told Charles that a woman had phoned asking about Vitaly Hakim. Charles phoned the woman back. She was Stephanie Parry, Vitaly's French girlfriend, and we found in some sources she's also known as Charmaine Carew, but again, with some of the names, there's no explanation for that. So
we couldn't find any information about Charmaine Carew at all.
No, but her name is listed instead of Stephanie on some websites.
Yeah.
But we'll refer to her as Stephanie. Stephanie came back to Bangkok looking for Vitaly. She checked into the President Hotel where Charles arranged to meet with her. He told Stephanie that he was a friend of Vitaly's and that he had gone to the gem mines. Charles offered to take Stephanie there. Later that night, she was in a car with both Charles and AJ. Charles had drugged her while they were having lunch, and then he dragged her out of the car and instructed AJ to strangle her to death. I don't know about you, but it really gets to me. The photos of Stephanie, which can be found online, shows her with a child. You can't see the child's face, but she's cradling a child, and I assume that must be her son or daughter. I'm not sure.
Was that picture in the Neville and Clark book as well?
Yes, yeah, and the Serpent TV show plays into this with Marie when she's talking with Stephanie at Cannet House. If I remember correctly, Stephanie's showing a picture and they're talking about children, and Marie, I think she mentions, maybe having children with Charles. And in the TV show, after Stephanie disappears, Marie confronts Charles, asking if he made an orphan out of that child. But there's not much information about her apart from what happened when she went looking for Vitaly and met Charles in Thailand. On the 12th of December, Nadine went to Charles's apartment to meet the Dutch couple, Cornelia and Henk. Charles had picked them up from the airport. Marie told Nadine that she didn't like the Dutch couple as they couldn't speak proper French. Sorry. Marie also wrote in her diary, "I am exhausted physically and morally. I feel sick, depressed and lonely. The dangers and risks of the business mean that I can never relax anymore. At every moment, I have to play a role. Our business makes me more and more nervous and scared." She must have known by this point that something was happening, because she's cashing in these traveller's checks, and people that are turning up at Cannet House, their belongings are then being left behind and they're disappearing.
And she's actively drugging them.
Yeah, so she's she might not have been complicit in the murders, but she's definitely, at least with Dominique, involved in drugging him, and she must have known that Charles was poisoning people.
Yeah.
Especially after that Australian couple. Since Dominique's experiment with his medicine, he pretended to drink it whenever Marie gave it to him. Francois received an $810 refund on his stolen traveller's checks, and his new French passport was at the embassy. He planned to go to Penang in order to get his visa renewed. He had suspicions that Charles was stealing passports and valuables from tourists. Dominique met the Dutch couple and the next morning offered to make them coffee, but Marie said that they were very unwell as they had been taking drugs, which is completely not like this couple. They weren't those types of people.
No, not at all.
Nadine commented on how unfortunate Charles's guests were, as they always seemed to get sick. Then Nadine and her husband went on holiday for a week, and Dominique was told that he's no longer welcome in apartment 504 unless he was invited to come up. Rainer Stein, he was helping Charles with his gem shop. Charles told him that he planned to get the Dutch couple to do some travelling for him. Rainer thought that this was to do with smuggling gems. He also noticed that Charles was apparently taking speed, which is weird because I thought Charles looked down on people taking drugs. Rainer was then packing his suitcase to go to Frankfurt when he heard a loud bang. He asked Maria what had happened, and she said it was the Dutch couple. Rainer tried opening the door to the room where they were, but AJ's voice called out from inside, and he said that the Dutch couple were very sick and that Charles was with them. Dominique became more insistent about getting his passport back as he wanted to go to France before Christmas. Both him and Francois felt that they were being watched all the time. They both went to a bar on one occasion and bumped into AJ as they were leaving, so it was obvious to them that AJ was following them. Charles asked to see both Francois and Dominique separately. When he saw Francois, he asked him if he was planning to go to Paris instead of Penang to report to the authorities about the jobs Charles was doing in Bangkok. Francois told Charles that he didn't need to worry and that he knew he stole passports and that he was actually going to Penang to get his visa renewed. Charles was concerned that Dominique would also go to the authorities in France. Dominique told Charles that he would not complain as both him and Marie had looked after him while he was sick. Charles was happy that Dominique would keep quiet and promised to give him his passport back the next day.
On the 15th of December, Charles and AJ put Cornelia and Henk in a car. When Cornelia asked where they were, Charles said that he was going to take them to hospital as they were both very sick. Charles drove to a small town called Rangsit, where AJ and Charles dragged the couple out of the car. Henk started to resist, so Charles hit him in the stomach, and AJ kicked him and choked him, but he was still moving. They dragged Henk to a puddle of water and held his head under it. AJ hit Cornelia over the head, and both him and Charles splashed the Dutch couple with petrol. A group of school children found the smouldering couple's bodies the next day. It says in the Neville and Clark book, Hank's right arm resting protectively on Cocky's shoulder. His neck was broken in 3 places. Cocky's knees were bent as though in fitful sleep. Her teeth were clenched. Her denim skirt, pulled above her thighs, was covered with mud. On the 16th of December, Charles gave Dominique his passport back, but it had been used. It was falling apart with pages missing, and Charles's picture was in it instead of Dominique's. Charles said he would take the passport to Hong Kong to fix it, as he had dozens there, and would be able to match the page colours. He changed the photo straight away. Dominique asked Charles about the Dutch couple, and said that he took them to the hospital the previous night. Dominique noticed the couple's belongings were still in their room. He also saw a rubber hosepipe on the fridge which smelt of petrol. Charles asked Dominique to get his trousers dry cleaned as they were wet with mud. On the 18th of December, Yannick took Charles, Marie and AJ to the airport to catch a flight to Hong Kong. Charles gave Yannick the keys to the safe. Yannick picked up a copy of the Bangkok Post. He saw there was an article and pictures about a couple that had been found dead. He recognised them as the Dutch couple. The police had identified the bodies as Australian couple Johnson and Rosanna Watson, but the woman was wearing a Made in Holland t-shirt. Yannick showed the article to Dominique, and they were both worried about what might happen to them. On the 22nd of December, Nadine and Remy returned from their holiday. They saw Yannick in Charles's apartment, who was waiting for Charles to call from Hong Kong. Yannick told Nadine and Remy about the article of the dead couple. Dominique showed them the hosepipe on the refrigerator and the muddy trousers. They all suspected that the Dutch couple were not the only victims. They searched the apartment and found hypodermic needles, walkie-talkies, handcuffs, a silver necklace belonging to Vitaly Akim, which Nadine recognised. Yannick searched the safe and found envelopes full of passports, including his own, Stephanie Parry's, and those belonging to Nadine's friends. They agreed they couldn't go to the Thai police due to corruption, nor could they go to the French embassy where Charles had friends. Yannick said he would go to Interpol once in France. Nadine and Remy lent both Yannick and Dominique money to buy tickets to go to France. They were all worried about Francois, who 3 days earlier had gotten into a car with AJ to go to Penang to renew his visa. When Nadine and Remy left the apartment, they discovered some of Charles's files. Inside one of them was a picture of a Vietnamese soldier standing holding 2 heads. The next day, Dominique, Remy and Yannick went to the bank to get the money for their flights to France. Francois returned to Cannet House, where Nadine told him everything that had happened. Later, Yannick asked Francois to accompany him to the French embassy to get an emergency laissez-passer, as he had no passport. Yannick, Francois and Dominique went to the airport, and Yannick confessed that Charles had gone to Kathmandu and not Hong Kong. He took out the key to Charles's safe from his pocket and threw it in the bin. All 3 of them made it safely onto the plane to Paris. That same night, Remy was working at the Oriental Hotel as a chef when he received a call from Charles, asking where Nadine was, and mentioned the others had disappeared. Charles said he was calling from Hong Kong. When Nadine and Remy got home, they saw that there were lights on in Charles's apartment, and the next morning, which was Christmas Eve, they saw AJ with 2 other men with a toolbox, and Nadine suspected that they were there to open the safe.
So we're going to backtrack a little bit here. On the 18th of December, Charles met Connie Jo Dronzich, a 28-year-old American from California. Connie was the only child of a prosperous business couple and was enrolled to study radiology at Stanford. But she had to leave before she could graduate, and some people suspected it was due to her using hard drugs. Aged 26, she married John Bronzich, who died of mysterious circumstances 10 weeks before she left for Asia. John's cause of death was stated as morphine poisoning in the coroner's report. His family disagreed with this verdict due to the insufficient amount of morphine found in his body. John had a fight with Connie while they were in a car on the way to a restaurant. John got out of the car during the argument, and the next morning he was found dead in a mobile home attached to Connie's house. At the scene, there was a syringe, small balloons, and an overturned chair. It is unclear how John travelled to Connie's house from where he got out of the car after the argument, which was 65 kilometres away, considering he had a sprained back and a surgical brace on. While Connie and John were separated, Connie was dating a man with a criminal record. He was a Santa Cruz drug dealer. One of John Bronzich's friends was also found dead at Connie's house, who fell asleep on her bed and discovered dead the next morning. The cause of death was listed as undetermined. Connie then went to Asia to break her drug habit. She had travelled to Kathmandu by bus from Delhi on the 15th of December. While on the bus, she met 3 other travellers, Luke, Sally and Katie. Connie stayed with them at the Oriental Lodge. She meandered the stalls of Freak Street and then went into the pie and chai shop where she met a man who dealt her morphine. Her friends at the Oriental Lodge then didn't see much of Connie until the 18th when she told them about meeting a gem dealer. She mentioned that the gem dealer had invited her to his apartments in Bangkok. Connie had made another friend, a Canadian called Laurent Carrier, who was planning a trip to the Everest Base Camp, something he had wanted to do since he was a child. Going back to Christmas Eve, Superintendent Chandra Rai went to the Oriental Lodge and told Connie's friends that 2 dead bodies had been found and they needed them to go to the mortuary to identify the bodies. At the mortuary, Luke saw a corpse of a woman with deep knife wounds in her chest, and her body had been burnt. Even her jewellery was charred. Luke saw another body, a male, that had also been badly burnt. All of the clothes, apart from fabric around one wrist, were burnt off. The throat was cut so deeply that the head was almost decapitated. Luke identified the bodies as Connie Jo Bronzich and Laurent Carrier.
He identified Laurent Carrier because of how tall the corpse was, but there was no identifying features left for him to say for sure it was Laurent.
Yeah. Luke told the superintendent that Laurent had left for an ancient town 45 kilometres away 4 days before. 2 days later, he had not returned, so Connie went to go and look for him. Luke also mentions that an Indian man with a small moustache came to the hotel desk to ask for Connie and Laurent. Her friends had last seen Connie on the 22nd when she said she was going to meet a Vietnamese gem dealer at the Oberoi. The police gave her friends a notebook found in Connie's room with a name and an address inside, Alain Gautier, 504 Cannet House. There were also names and addresses of well-known drug dealers in the notebook.
On Christmas Day, the 25th of December, a white Datsun was driving near the Bishnamati River when a jeep overtook the car and 2 men motioned the passengers in the Datsun to pull over. Superintendent Rai questioned the occupants, asking for their names and nationalities. The man introduced himself as Henricus Bintania, Henk for short, and said that he was from Holland. He introduced his wife, Kokkie Hemke. It was Charles and Marie. Cornelia Hemke also went by Kokkie. That was what people called her. Following the description of the Vietnamese gem dealer, Connie's friends spoke about, the superintendent found a guest at the Oberoi matching the description who was registered as Henricus Bintania. The superintendent showed them a picture of Connie and asked if they recognised her. Both of them said no. Superintendent Rai then searched the Datsun, where he found a pair of baggy jeans. Charles said that he had never seen them before. The superintendent asked Charles and Marie to stay in Kathmandu until the investigations were complete and asked them to follow him to the police station. Connie's friends went to the police station to identify if the man was the gem dealer, but they couldn't be sure it was him. On the 26th of December, Charles went back to the police station and to Superintendent Rai's office and asked for his pen back, which he had left behind the day before. After Charles left his office, Superintendent Rai considered the evidence against the man he thought was Henk Bintania and concluded that he appeared gracious and carefree. Not the qualities of a criminal. He also didn't have much evidence against him, although a farmer had seen a car turning around where the bodies were found, a car with a number plate beginning with 5, matching the Datsun driven by Henk Bintania. There were also receipts to place Henk Bintania at the Oberoi at the time of the murders, but the superintendent thought this too methodical, so he called the couple back in for questioning and to search their room. Charles would claim several years later that Connie's name was given to him by his employers in Hong Kong. He said that she had been hired to fly to Bangkok to pick up a consignment of heroin and take it back to Kathmandu. 2 friends from Santa Cruz were due to meet her around Christmas, who would carry the heroin into America. Charles described Lorraine as a drug courier who had been hired in London. These murders were the first to involve a knife, intended to create a big show. After Connie's body was identified, the US First Secretary sent a telegram to her parents asking for Connie's dental records.
On the 28th of December, Superintendent Rye led a raid of Charles's and Marie's room at the Oberoi Hotel, but no one was inside. Items were strewn over the floor. There were a number of paperback books, including Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche. There were also empty tins of Regulus, a chocolate-flavoured laxative, yum, boxes of coloured pencils and a protractor.
So he can do his colouring in.
Of the passports. So he could colour in the passports. No. It was what he used to falsify passports. There was also crumpled black nylon lingerie, a portable fire extinguisher, and some cassettes for learning Spanish.
I mean, that's everything you take on holiday, really.
Yep, you need that and all of that in your checklist.
In your attaché case.
Yes, with your moustache and wig. Charles knew the Nepalese police were planning the dawn raid. During the night, he and Marie wrapped their belongings in a bedsheet and threw them out the window for AJ to catch as he was waiting below. Marie wrote in her diary, "It is a new start, spiritual, physical connection, tenderness, glow, complicity. Everything is shared, and we make only one person. I belong to him. I feel I am desired, loved for myself, that he needs me, my presence, my smile to live. At last I am happy. I make plans and think only of our baby." Girl!
Do you get the impression that she could be pregnant at this point?
It's never alluded to anywhere that she was. But, I mean, obviously she doesn't have a child. Yeah, I'm not sure. But it just goes to show how brainwashed, how much of a prisoner she was to him at this point. Wouldn't want to have a baby with that man.
No. So many people did, though.
Yeah. I wonder if she knew that if he had children.
Yeah, I wondered that.
In the Netflix show, there is a scene where he swears on Madhu's life when she confronts him about something. But that's just the script. So I don't know if in real life, if she knew about the daughter he had with Chantal Compagnon or any of the other children that he had.
Yeah, I get the impression that she would have minded doing all the things that she did if she knew that he had children.
Yeah, who knows? We'll never know. Charles used Vitaly Hakim's passport and Marie used a visa page from Laurent Carrier's, and they crossed the border into India with AJ. When they reached Varanasi, they met an Israeli tourist, Alain Aaron Jacobs. He was a crane driver who had saved up for his holiday to India. He was happy to meet a group of fellow tourists like Charles, Marie and AJ and agreed to share a hotel room with AJ. The next day, Charles, Marie and AJ went to Goa. On the same day, Alan Jacobs' body was found dead in the hotel room. Charles said that his murder was an accident and that he wanted his passport and blamed his death on AJ. He later said that he felt sorry for Alan Jacobs' death, as he knew how hard Alan had worked to be able to save up for his holiday.
That's the only person that he feels sorry about, according to the Neville and Clark book.
Yeah.
He doesn't say anything like that about the other victims.
No, and he just victim blames. Well, in the Neville book, he tries to tie it all to this drug ring, but later on, he just victim blames, saying that they're drug addicts.
They left their homes. They don't appreciate what they have at home, the stable home life.
Or like they weren't good people anyway.
Yeah.
Big coming from someone like him.
Mm.
On the 9th of January in 1976, Charles met 3 Frenchmen in Goa. He seduced them with his talk of gems, and him, Marie and AJ took the Frenchmen to a small beach resort where they had dinner and drinks. By 9 p.m, the 3 men had passed out and Charles and AJ threw them into the back of a van, which had been stripped of its valuables, and with a rock placed on the accelerator, they jumped out of the van, leaving the drugged Frenchmen inside, making it look like they were victims of a car accident. On the 31st of January, Charles and Marie flew to Hong Kong via Singapore. AJ went to Madras because he wanted to return to Delhi to see his family. Charles and Marie met an American school teacher, David Alain Gautier, who they drugged and stole his cash, checks and credit cards. Charles gave Marie a gold Bulova watch. Never heard of that brand. But then, apart from Rolex, I don't know anything about watches.
I don't often go shopping for gold watches.
No.
Not yet, anyway.
Yeah. I've just got my beaten up secondhand Garmin. That's literally held together by hair ties, by the way. So yeah, Charles gave Marie a very fancy watch, which he purchased with the money he stole from the school teacher, along with a diamond ring for his mistress, Rung. As Charles didn't care about his arrest warrant in Bangkok and had no remorse over the killings of innocent travellers, he planned to keep up the pretense of his affluence and escape suspicion. He believed the police could be bought anyway, but there was one problem. And that was Nadine and what she knew about Charles. And this is where we end part 2.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Quite a long one.
Yeah.
Considering that was just a year.
Not even a year, Nazia.
Yeah.
That was mid-1975 to the start of 1976.
Yeah. So it escalated quite quickly.
I'd say he has been very, very busy. He's met new girlfriends.
Yeah.
He bought a house, a set of apartments.
Yeah, because he bought a few apartments, didn't he, to house all his minions.
Oh, yes. And he had the bungalow in Pattaya.
Yep, which he liked to take his victims to. And Marie is just getting wrapped up more and more and more in his crimes.
Dominique is basically being held prisoner.
Yeah, and thank goodness he got out.
Yeah.
That's one positive thing. Him and Francois and Yannick, it was all 3 of them, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, did they do it? Because you lose track. But no, at least... Thankfully, 3 of them managed to escape and, Nadine's starting to cotton on. She's putting the pieces together and we're going to see in the next episode what she does with those pieces. Yeah, but we just learn how Charles, he's just becoming more and more ruthless, more confident about his crimes because these are happening in such a short succession. He's getting his victims from same locations and just repeating the same tactics. And after all that, he still, he just thinks he can bribe the Thai police, even though that there's an arrest warrant for him.
Yeah, but we should probably say that they were very corrupt at the time. They would take bribes from people.
Yeah, they were. But I mean, this is a lot of international, a lot of people missing and there would have been other agencies looking for them.
Yeah, but a lot of people weren't too bothered about these people because people went missing all the time on the hippie trail.
Yeah, and they were travellers. So, as we mentioned before, communication wasn't instant. So it would have been ages before anyone did notice that they were missing or, if they had people that cared for them. And sadly, in Stephanie's case, she actually went looking for her boyfriend and ended up being a victim.
He lured her there, basically. Because he could have said, oh, he's gone off somewhere, I don't know where he is.
Yeah, but instead he decided to invite her over and add her to his list of victims. But maybe he also did that because he knew that she was looking for him and he was the only contact that she had.
So we should probably mention what's coming up in part 3, which is hopefully our final episode of this saga. So we can round everything up and make a neat conclusion.
Don't know about neat, but...
But we will be asking questions such as, what happens to Nadine? And is Herman Knippenberg a cake? Will justice be served or a spiked aperitif? You'll have to tune in, listeners.
Yes. If you want to find out what happens next, come back for the next episode.
Yeah. Please download wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you for listening to the show. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can find more information about the show on our website at feloniouspod.com or on our Instagram at felonious.pod.
Links to our show notes can be found in the episode description, as well as through our website and social media. You can visit our Contact Us page and tell us what you think about the show, and if there are any cases you would like us to cover. We hope you join us for the next episode. Goodbye.
Bye.